And I will be circulating the recording after the seminar today. This is why I asked everyone to register, so I have everyone's email addresses, and you'll get all this great content and resources in your inbox in the coming days. All right, so today I am very delighted to be presenting on a brand new topic, which is empowering students with feedback. What we'll do is take a deep dive into leveraging feedback with our tool, SpacesEDU. And this means that you should already be somewhat familiar with SpacesEDU, have at least set up your class and created a post, and you might have already attended a training that was hosted by your district. So if you haven't done any of those trainings before, that's okay. You can always stick around near the end, and I can go through some of your questions. I'll also be available after the hour today for a Q&A drop-in. So if you're interested in that, you could also sign up for that Q&A session. It should be in the same email that you received earlier this week. So we'll explore some best practices to equip students with agency in their own learning journeys. And then through the collaborative nature of the platform, you'll experience how SpacesEDU supports teacher, peer, family, and even self-assessment opportunities alongside its suite of assessment features. A little bit about me before we start. Before joining the SpacesEDU team, I was an academic advisor at York University. I'm particularly excited to discuss today's topic because student empowerment and student success was at the heart of my advising practice. Nothing made me happier than witnessing my students taking ownership of their learning and being able to make decisions with agency. And a lot of this has to do with the work that you're putting into your classrooms prior to students starting their undergraduate journeys, right? So to me, feedback leads to awareness, which then leads to action and ownership. What I do today is I help as SpacesEDU partners, so that means educators like yourselves, understand how to use our platform and identify features that are best fit for them based on their teaching goals and their practices. In the next hour, we will be covering these 4 items. So first, we'll dive into what effective feedback means in terms of student learning. We'll get that conversation going, and then we'll dive into some research-based tips for effective feedback that you can implement in your classrooms. And we'll wrap things up with how to set up your account on SpacesEDU to allow for effective feedback. And I will show you also how to find some of our great SpacesEDU resources at your fingertips for effective feedback. And I will make sure to be circulating all of these resources in an email as well. Okay, so what I would like everyone to do is let's get the conversation going on Mentimeter. I have put in the link in the chat if everybody could take some time to open that up, or you can go ahead and scan the QR code to join the Mentimeter. I've also put in the code in the chat, so you can go to menti.com and put in the code. And while everyone's doing that, let me open up the Mentimeter on my screen. Oop. All right, loving the engagement already. So my question for you today is, what does feedback mean to you in your teaching practice? Let's see what everyone's saying. Specific, yes, feedback needs to be specific so students are able to identify what needs to be improved on or what they're doing well. Constructive, yes, I love that as well. It needs to be constructive. Again, that means descriptive, nothing generalized. We need to be very constructive about what kind of comments we're making towards our students' learning. I'm seeing some engagement in the chat as well. Sandra said strengths and stretches to guide progress. Yep, absolutely. And James said it should be immediate, and that's true. Research has shown that immediate feedback is more effective than delayed feedback. And I will show you how you can do this on SpacesEDU. Sandra said encouraging. Yeah, absolutely. We need to be careful about how we word our feedback and how it could be interpreted from a student's perspective. I'm seeing the top 3 words that were used here, specific, meaningful, and constructive, all of which help to make the student more engaged with their learning and more motivated to keep improving. Loving this, and I'm sure to share this word cloud with you after the presentation. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. So you're probably familiar with John Hattie and Helen Timperley. They're big in the research world when it comes to effective feedback in education. They focus on how learners receive feedback, so the student perspective, rather than on information that has been given to the learner, which tends to be more of the teacher's perspective. I wanted to share this really powerful quote with you today. It reads, constructive feedback is among the most powerful tools for promoting children's social, moral, and intellectual development. And I'm sure we can all agree, based on the word cloud that we just saw today, that this is in fact true. Now, the term feedback is often used to describe all kinds of comments made after the fact, including advice, praise, and even evaluation. But none of these are feedback, strictly speaking. Effective feedback is understood by the recipient and motivates them to want to learn more effectively. And I wanted to show you a clip here on the topic of feedback. Although this is not about a student in the classroom, it does speak to how constructive feedback should probably be given and what the individual is expecting from the people they're asking feedback from. So in this scene from an HBO show called Insecure, we have one of the main characters, Lawrence, who's walking into a room with his 2 bosses and asking them for constructive feedback on a pitch he just did on a new app he's developing. So throughout the scene, what I want you to do is think about whether or not Lawrence is receiving constructive feedback and why or why not. And we can discuss this after. Let me go ahead and play you the clip now.
What's up, Lawrence?
What can we do for you?
I just thought I'd swing by, see what's up, see if you guys had any feedback about my woo-woo pitch. Yeah, I know the part in the presentation about my front user implementation wasn't as fully fleshed out as I would have hoped, but I had some additional ideas that I would love to share with you guys.
No, we thought that part was good. Yeah, there was some really interesting stuff in there.
So, if you guys don't have any additional thoughts?
If anything, maybe some privacy concerns, but take it or leave it.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
We really want to encourage you to keep the ideas coming. We love having your perspective and your energy around here.
And you bring a lot to the team. You're doing great.
We can't wait for Lawrence 2.0.
Sounds good.
And those sneakers you had on the other day. What store did you get those from again?
It's a spot downtown called Ice Kicks.
And those are?
Yeah.
All right, so that was kind of a silly way to show you what constructive feedback should or should not look like. So I'm interested to hear everyone's opinion on what we just watched. If you could pop your comments in the chat, and we can get talking about what what was happening in this scene? Was it constructive or was it not constructive? Why and why not? James, his specific asks were not answered. That's right, very general, not vague comments, a lot of general positive, vague comments. We're not paying attention, no direction at all. Again, not constructive in nature. Yes, Christina, I'm going to touch on that. I love how Lawrence genuinely wanted feedback. That's true. Frivolous compliments are nice, but not helpful at all. That is so true, Jocelyn. It's nice to hear that we're doing a good job, but sometimes you want to know what we can improve on. Had they actually seen the pitch? Thank you, Nancy. That is a great question. Those types of comments could be copied and pasted into any situation. Non-constructive was not clear that they listened to his presentation. Almost dismissive. That's true, Roy. Not really addressing the actual question that Lawrence was asking. Yeah, I think we can all agree that this is not a constructive feedback at all. In this scene, if you notice, Lawrence already did his part in self-assessment, like Christina asked. He genuinely wanted to know how his pitch went. So he went into his meeting with a growth mindset, already critically identifying areas he could improve on. Now, however, his not receiving any constructive feedback from his bosses about how his pitch went from his call, and they aren't being descriptive, as we can see. They're giving him praises instead of describing what he can do to improve his app and his pitch. They don't even address his next steps on how to elevate the delivery of his pitch in the future. And to be fair, Lawrence's bosses were not entirely wrong for stating his strengths. In fact, research has shown that effective feedback starts with a glow, meaning what the student did really well, prior to a grow, what they need to do differently to improve. Feedback essentially reduces the gap between where a student is now in their learning and where they need to be. In The Power of Feedback by John Hattie and Helen Timperley, which I will be mentioning multiple times throughout this presentation, but they provide a model of feedback that is based on these 3 questions you're seeing on your screens. We have first, what are the goals, right? Where am I going? And in this case, it's what are their learning and the curricular objectives. That's what I like to know as a student. And how am I going? What progress am I making towards these learning objectives? And finally, what is my next step? What actions should I take to make better progress in my learning? Should I be reviewing certain resources, maybe reviewing a unit to get me to my next step? So would anyone like to share from their own experience providing effective feedback to their students? I'd love to know if you were already applying these 3 guiding principles. Let me know in the chat. And as educators, a natural inclination might be to provide as much feedback as possible, covering a wide range of topics and skills. However, it is important to keep these 3 questions at the forefront while providing feedback, because doing so provides a measurable objective and keeps the amount of information manageable for your students while providing them direction for next steps. Let's see what we're seeing in the chat. The challenge is providing meaningful and timely feedback. Yes, that is true. And sometimes as educators, as teachers, you're very busy people. I totally get that. So you still want to be able to give that meaningful feedback in a timely fashion. And there's some tricks I could show you that you could apply in your practice using SpacesEDU. We'll for sure address some of your questions, some of your concerns, or maybe things that are on your wish list that you like to tackle when it comes to providing feedback in a timely manner. Thank you so much for sharing. I love to see all your comments, so keep them coming. Right, so let's move on to those 5 research-based tips that I promised you for providing students with meaningful feedback. So first, you have to be as specific as possible, right? Going back to that video we saw, general comments don't work. They're not effective. So feedback like, great job or not quite there yet, don't provide any insight. Instead, researchers suggest taking the time to provide learners with information on on what they did well and what may still need improvement. It might also be useful to tell the learner what they're doing differently than they were before. So if there's a slight improvement, no matter the degree of improvement, it's always nice to slide that into your feedback to your students. And the sooner the better. We've already mentioned this a couple times. Delayed feedback is not as effective, so try to give feedback as close to the learning and assessment task as possible. Numerous studies suggest that immediate feedback allows for better comprehension and improved performance. And SpacesEDU allows you to provide that real-time feedback. Even if you're on a time crunch, you can record feedback using audio or even video recording. So those are some of the features you could leverage. And you should definitely be addressing the learner's advancement towards a goal. When giving feedback, it should be clear to students how the information they are receiving will help them progress towards those curricular or learning objectives. And feedback should be presented carefully, right? Feedback can be received and interpreted the wrong way. Some learners may feel too strictly monitored, controlled, or even competitive sometimes, which can reduce their motivation to learn. So start with strength-based feedback and move on to the improvement strategies. So going back to that glow and grow format, that's maybe something you could explore and adopt in your practices. And finally, my personal favorite, involving the learner in the process, because we want them to be empowered. We want them to be critical about their learning. So ask the student what they think they need to improve on and encourage them to ask questions, to be curious. This is where the self-assessment piece comes into play. It would be useful here to ask thought-provoking questions to initiate deeper reflection opportunities. We have the perfect resource for you, which I'll share in my follow-up email and show you later on what that looks like as well. But we do have a bank of questions that you could reuse and have that apply to your students through their self-reflection. Now, you may already be following these tips in your teaching practices, right? Especially if you're leveraging SpacesEDU features, you might already be adopting these. Let's see what's happening in the chat. I use a similar format for setting goals. I use what am I working on? What can I do to achieve my goals? Who can help me and how will I know I am there? Yes, sometimes it's okay to ask for help, but that means the student is learning to be resourceful as well. Again, going back to feeling empowered and not discouraged and stopping in their learning. In PE, you are getting the skill. How about you try this? Yes, that's true. I love that. You're acknowledging what they're doing right and then giving them strategies on how they can improve in other areas. I like to overlap yesterday, today, and tomorrow discussion to start classrooms to ground what the current lesson is. Again, going back to reflection, that prompts reflections from the past, present, and future. And great discussion tips for sure. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This might actually be the most valuable tip from this entire webinar and something you should definitely consider adding to your comment bank. This tip might actually trump those 5 tips I've just shared with you. So, even though they're research-based, that's cool and everything, but this actually might be the cherry on top. What if I told you that you could empower your students with one magical phrase that has been proven to boost student effort by 40%? 40%, yeah. So a team of psychologists from Stanford, Yale, Columbia, among others, conducted a study on this very question back in 2013. What I appreciated about this study is that the group of researchers targeted minority students as well, understanding that there is a racial divide in education, that non-white students face different challenges in their learning, reiterating again that learning is individual and should be differentiated. In this study, they had middle school teachers assign an essay writing assignment to their students, after which students were given different types of teacher feedback. To their surprise, researchers discovered that there was one particular type of feedback that improved student effort and performance, so much so that they deemed it magical. So I'm going to share this study in the chat with everyone, and feel free to take a look afterwards on your own time. Very fascinating stuff. So in this research, students who received this feedback chose to revise their paper far more often than students who did not. So we're talking about a 40% increase among white students and 320% boost among Black students. And that improved their performance significantly. That magical phrase was, I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know that you can reach them. What I took away from this study is that effective feedback is not only about quality of information to provide to students, it should aim to create a sense of belonging. Students want to feel part of a group. They want to feel connected, and they also need that sense of belief, right? That could come from you as educators. So you're telling them that they are capable of reaching those standards, those curricular objectives, no matter how high they may seem. There are a myriad of creative ways we can facilitate this on SpacesEDU, and I can't wait to show you these features later on today. Speaking of which, let's start with our flexible learning environments. So you can diversify the types of feedback you're providing to your students. We have, if you remember correctly, 3 different types of spaces within your accounts. So you have your class space, and then you have the ability to create subspaces, individual or group spaces, which you can see now on your screens. And below each graphic, I've highlighted the types of feedback each space allows for, which are teacher, peer, family, and self-assessments as well. Within the class space, since this is a public space where with all your students, it's class-wide, it's definitely a great space for teacher, peer, and family feedback. You could leverage the activities feature. You could post to the class space and engage in discussions in the comments section. You could even ask students to post maybe presentations or any type of learning. And you have the ability to showcase curriculum standards and goals, so meaning your learning objectives, and success criteria as well through our proficiency scales feature. As for the individual spaces, because it's personal, it's one-on-one and private between you and the student, this is a great place for self-assessment, for obviously teacher feedback that students can review privately, but also because you have the option to give family access, families can also get involved and engage in that feedback loop. I've created 2 different types of individual spaces for the purpose of feedback, and I will share those with you as well. But what I was thinking is maybe something along the lines of a feedback journal for accountability. The student can track their own growth, going back to self-assessment and empowerment as well. For goal setting, that's another great use case for individual spaces. Private space for them to track their advancement towards the goals they've set maybe prior at the beginning of the year. It's also a great space for digital portfolios. So for sharing with families and also student-driven content. And then finally, we have group spaces, which is great for teacher and peer feedback because you have the ability to segment students into groups and they can be paired up, for example. So definitely ideal for group projects or just peer-to-peer assessments. I'm thinking of maybe like a unit in English language arts, perhaps creative writing. You could have students paired up and share their short stories, any creative writing pieces that you assign, and they can provide each other feedback. And that could also take some load off your plate as well, and would teach them how to be critical about each other's learning as well. I'm going to pause here in case there are any questions about the types of spaces. Nope, none so far. Okay. All right, so on SpacesEDU, you can leverage a variety of features besides just the space types, which is the first one that you see here on your screen. So the Spaces allows you to create differentiated learning environments, but you also have a number 2, which is your comment section. You can provide feedback in any format in real time. So you could do text, or you could just use audio, video recording, whatever the case may be. And then finally, we have, you could pin specific curricular objectives as curriculum goals, which you can see here, number 4. So students can clearly see what they need to work towards and what to focus on for future growth and learning. And in a click, oh yes.
Sorry, I something popped up in that last slide in the group.
Yes.
Something came up. I was wondering if I can ask a quick question, because I was
Sure.
thinking about using this as a doing a poetry unit, and I'm going to have the students working with each other and giving each other peer feedback. Okay. And so when they use an iPad, how do they go about connecting that feedback to their specific account? So they just use that QR code. Would that be the easiest, to have that QR code with them and then take a picture of the QR code after they're done with their file or their, and then just pop it right onto their account? Yes, QR codes would be the fastest way to get connected to their accounts. So you can generate that easily from your teacher account for all your students. Yep. And then that would be, yes, definitely the fastest way. And then they would jump into their group spaces respectively from their devices, and then carry on with providing each other feedback. I'm wondering if anybody has tried that and has like implemented it already and had a successful way of doing that. Do you have your QR code on their desk, or is like a spot in the classroom where you keep your QR codes? I'm just curious about that. Yeah, if any teachers would like to share their practice. Yeah, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Sorry. So I keep their QR codes with me as well, but they have my elementary kids keep them in their agendas in the front cover. So that's it helps me make sure that they bring their agendas to class as well. So.
Smart. Very smart.
I would like to add some. I have not done for Spaces because the QR code looks like they're still in testing mode. But one of my colleagues used to do it with the Blueprint, my Blueprint. And with QR code, what she was doing was she used to laminate them and keep a whole bunch of them like in a key ring, so that everybody can easily access. Usually little children tend to lose them here and there. And sometimes if you send them home, then it's full probability that next day it's not going to come back. So yeah, I like to keep them laminated in my classroom.
Yeah, that's a great, all great feedback for sure.
Thank you.
For QR codes, they are actually live up and running. That's been released at the end of August, I believe. So you can start using QR codes, no problem. But I would just echo what everyone is saying. It should be put in a safe place, right? Because they're for individual access. So just to avoid the risk of mixing up the QR codes. So I think gluing it to the agenda is a great option, or you having it in a folder separately, and when they need access to it, they come to you for that.
I have a question. Tatiana, did you just say that QR codes are already ready to use in the classrooms with Spaces?
Yes, they are. Yeah, absolutely.
But we're not able to access in our school district.
I'm wondering if it has something to do with your licensing, or if the district decided not to go forward with it, because it depends on what the district leads want. So if you want to double check that, I would recommend speaking to a SpacesEDU lead at your school to confirm if that was a decision made at the district level, because I've heard of that as well.
Sorry, I know that I had trouble with QR codes until I went into Spaces and moved the kids to active. So after the kids got, they joined the class, I had to physically go in and put whether they were active or not. So that might be something you need to do in the Spaces. If you click on Spaces Students, and then you'll see parent, student, active, or whatever. I think it's the active thing. That was the kicker for me anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Are you in 82 as well?
No, I'm in 75.
Okay.
If anything, Moan, you can also contact SpacesEDU support. I put the email in the chat. It's hello@spacesedu.com. And then it can investigate for you if there's something going on with your account.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I know someone had raised their hand and they took it back down. So I'm wondering if they wanted to speak now. Sorry to keep you waiting. No? Okay, no problem. Rachel asked another quick question. Will it be possible in the future to add more than one file to the feedback comment, like more than one photo? You can add, I guess you could add multiple files if you wanted to. I would have to double check if you could do that simultaneously. But if it's not simultaneous, you could keep adding those files one after the other. That should be a problem. But if you're talking about simultaneously adding files in one comment, then I will have to double check for you. Let me put this down as a note.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Right now, I can only put one photo in at a time. As things develop, it might be nice to be able to put more than one.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, that would make sense to me as well, given that that is possible for posts and activities and messages, I think, as well. So that is an improvement feature I can bring up to our product team. Thank you so much for sharing. Doug asked, if we have a new student added to our class since receiving our roster, how do we add them to our Spaces roster? If your district has implemented rostering, that data should be automatically updated for you, and they decide when they send that over. But if you want to double check, I would recommend speaking to the SpacesEDU lead at your schools to see how often they update the data. All right. Okay, thank you so much for these questions. And I love that we can share best practices with one another. This is great having all of BC in one SpacesEDU webinar. Okay, so that brings us to actually exploring the SpacesEDU account. So let me take you to my class here. Just going to do a little refresh just in case it timed out. Okay, so as soon as you enter your class, you'll see the top navigation bar, of course, essentially your control center. highlighting the different features, but we're going to look at the space types within the class first. So we'll go into the spaces section here. As you can see, I have multiple space types set up. Of course, I have my main class space, which is done by default once I have all that set up on SpacesEDU. And I've gone ahead myself, created 3 different individual spaces and a group space as well. You can modify the visibility settings by simply clicking on the 3 dots in any of your spaces. So these ones right here. If you want to promote family feedback, I do recommend giving access to families and enabling comments as well. Now let's create an individual space for portfolios. This is particularly great for young learners and also to promote student-driven content. So to do that, within the Spaces tab, we would click on the plus create button, create individual spaces, hit next, and we want to create one for all of our students. So we check that off and make sure we're including future students. So for any transferring students, they would also be guaranteed to have a portfolio space created for them. Hit next. Give it a name, so we'll call it my portfolio. And you can also give it add a description of what the space is intended for, what some guidelines maybe you'd like to provide, and attach up to 10 files here if you want to give additional resources to your students, and hit save. So now that my space is created, I have to make sure that it becomes visible to my students. So by making sure it becomes visible, I have to click on the review settings link here in blue. And I can make it active so that students can actually post content to the space. And for family access, I will make it visible so they can see the space. And maybe what I also want is give them the ability to comment on their students' posts throughout the year to provide that family feedback as well. So we click save. So now your students have access, they can start posting. Sorry, go ahead.
Can other people see those comments, or is that just families and teacher?
Just families and teachers, exactly. And the student, right? The student who is in the space. And one thing to note is because it's individual spaces, students can't see each other's spaces, remains private. Yeah, great question, Doug. All right. Let me just go back here. So that was to create us additional space. So you can decide what will make sense for you. And one thing that we have heard back from teachers who are perhaps teaching younger students, they want to use the spaces for portfolio purposes. And what they might do is just have one individual space and maybe even change the class space settings to hidden. That way students only have access to their portfolio space instead of everything else. And it removes any room for error or confusion when they're logged into their Spaces accounts. So you can really customize set up your class as you'd like, what will make sense for you and your students. I wanted to go into an individual space now. We'll go into the feedback and learning journal space and show you an activity that I created, and you're free to replicate and use this same activity as well if you'd like. So let's go into this. One of the best parts of a space in general is that you can add the description, right, as you saw earlier today. And you can tell the student what the space is about. You can include media for them and attachments. And this description is always pinned to the top of the page for students, so they can quickly refer back to this information. To create an activity from the space, you can click on the create button, activity. And as you can see here, I have a bunch of activities I've already created. So the great thing is once you create an activity, it gets stored in an activity portal, if you will, like a bank. And it's linked directly to your account. So any activities across your spaces will be in one place, and you can always pull the same one every single time. For example, I have a weekly feedback log, and I know that I'm going to reuse and abuse this content every single week. So I don't have to type it in every single time. All I have to do is simply click on use activity, and it pre-populates the information for me. And then I just have to make sure I'm selecting the right class. That is, if you have multiple classes linked to your account, and then the right space, which for us, we were looking at the feedback and learning journal individual space here. And it's assigned to all my students, just double checking all the information is right. You can always add media if you want to, and assign a start date of your choice and even a due date as well. So you want students to start this today and make it due maybe the following week. And then you click assign. And now your students have that activity assigned to them on their end, and they'll receive a notification in their accounts. So when it comes to giving feedback for activities, all you have to do is go to your activities section, select an activity of your choice that you've already assigned, and then it would give you a list of students to which you've assigned the activity to. And once they do submit the activity, the status will change from assigned to received, I believe. So what you'll be able to do is click on the student to provide feedback. And you could always ask the student to resubmit as well. So you provide them the feedback, and you say you think they could improve on certain areas of the assignment. You can quickly identify those within the comment section here, and then they can resubmit it to you. And what's nice as well and really convenient is once a student starts the activity, and even if they don't submit it, it does get drafted, so you have access to that content. So if they start the activity and it says drafted, you could take a quick look at the content. For this student, it does say drafted, but that's because I was attempting to submit the activity for them. So I don't have real examples here, but you would be able to see what they have written so far. And then again, going into the comment box here, provide them feedback on how it's going, and intervene at the right time if they need to improve on something as part of the assignment. And finally, you can always start an activity for a student as well. So if you click on start activity, you can submit it for them. It's just especially useful if they have the evidence of learning in the class and you happen to have access to a device. You can always take a quick picture of it and submit it for them on the spot. Okay, let me see if there's anything in the chat. Can you please go over creating a post for all students on their portfolio with curriculums, and then how to give individual feedback once students have posted their work? What is the difference between a post and an activity? I do want to address Rachel's concerns. Everyone will see all files and comments on the class space though. So what you want to do in that case is, if you're going to assign activities that you don't want to share with the entire class, or like the submissions you don't want to be visible, you do want to create an individual space for that reason. That way everything remains private. I love that Adele is answering Jane's question. What is the difference between a post and an activity? An activity is more for specific assignments, and posts can be anything informative and general. That is precisely the difference between the two. Activities allow you to be more specific about the instructions you're expecting for the work they're submitting. And it's also a nicer way to track the work as it comes in. As you can see, it's in a one-stop shop. You can see everything on a single screen. Okay, so I have also Tara asking if we can go over creating a post for all students on the portfolio with curriculum tags, and then how to give individual feedback once students have posted their work. Sure, we can definitely do that. So let's go to the feed. And from the feed, which is essentially kind of like your classroom dashboard, you click on the plus create button and then click on post. And then write the content. Hit next and select the respective space, which is individual for my portfolio. Click next, and we want to make this visible to all students. And then we go to post, and it's been posted to their portfolio space. So if you go to spaces and then go to my portfolio, that's where the post will appear. And all of your students have this in their individual spaces. If we wanted to tag a specific post, like this specific post, we would click on the curriculum tag here, the little icon. And then you can go ahead and select anything that is relevant to the content of the post, and then hit submit. And it will immediately let you know that this specific post is demonstrating X, Y, Z when it comes to curriculum outcomes. Okay, so can you give teacher feedback under the group posts, individual post options? Yes, you can give teacher feedback under any type of post across your spaces. To clarify, do you have to create an activity to class? If I only want to post a finished project, I take a picture and post it for families to see. You don't always have to create activities. So if you wanted to share work, like you're describing, it would make more sense to just do a post in that case. And by clicking on the create and then post button here. And when you get to the screen where you're selecting students, you just select the one to which it applies to. But again, making sure that you are putting this work, this content in a dedicated individual space, because you may, I'm assuming you may not want to share that work with all of your class. Can you also assess on the proficiency scale and on the individual posts? Yes, so proficiency scales are actually linked to curriculum tags. I can show you how that works in a moment. So let me just go back here. I'm going to go back to my feed. Let's see, you've identified. Yes,
I just gotta say, this is so cool.
Oh,
I'm so happy
I'm
about
glad. I'm so glad this is informative. Thank you so much, Doug. I'm seeing like we might be going over our time here, but that's okay. If everyone wants to maybe migrate back to the Q&A session, and we can keep this conversation going after 11 a.m. We could do that. Okay, so anyways, well, let's say we want to provide feedback on this post. Couple ways we could do that. We can even give a reaction. So maybe we want to give them a little applause, like what we see. Let's add in feedback in the comment section. Just going to copy paste what I have here. In this instance, I'm using text, but you can, as we know, students require sometimes they require differentiated learning. So we give you the option to use other types of media, like I mentioned. So might be better to use audio for a student. Maybe they respond better that way. But for the student, we'll just do a text. So that's one way with the comments on a post. And then for curriculum tags and the proficiency scales. If you remember, you click on the little tag button here to add a curriculum tag. Let's identify some standards here that are applicable to the content that we're seeing. And I have here the proficiency scales for BC enabled, so perfect way to showcase how to use them. Then you can assign the level of proficiency. And just within the same time, at the same time that you're assigning a tag, you can assign a proficiency level and then hit submit. So now the post is demonstrating 2 competencies to which you've assigned proficiencies as well. And then I'm not sure if you caught that, but it also updated the side panel here. So it tells you how many posts are linked to specific tags, which also allows you to filter through on your feed. So you're able to easily track what you've already worked towards and maybe identify curriculum outcomes that you should be implementing for the term.
All right, can I just pop in?
Yes, Jocelyn.
So something I learned just recently about curriculum tags that maybe you could address, and maybe in the link you can provide it for other people as well, is I was looking for, I teach 8 to 12 leadership, which is a locally developed course. So okay. There's no curriculum tags in our curriculum, BC curriculum, that has leadership specific tags. And so the curriculum standards project was pretty cool. So apparently I can just send my tags and the next day they should appear on Spaces for me to use, because there is no option of just typing in your own curriculum tag like previous platforms enabled us to do before. Anyway, that was really cool. So I thought that maybe that would be something everybody would like to know.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Jocelyn. I can show everyone where to find that information. So just really quickly, I know we didn't get to go through all of the features, but like I said, I can invite everyone to the other drop-in session if you haven't signed up yet. I'm just going to find the link for you so you can go ahead and sign up. And we can tackle those questions in that session together. I appreciate your patience as I retrieve the registration link for you. Okay. Oh, there we go. It should be in the chat box now. So feel free to register, and we can continue the conversation there. But when it comes to the resources, as Jocelyn mentioned, if you want to add your own tags, you could do so. You could add it to the database. So what you would do is from the SpacesEDU.com website, go to the Help Center and type in a keyword. I would put curriculum tags. And then would click on, can I add custom sets of curriculum tags? And it goes over how you would step-by-step with screenshots on how you would go and add it to the Common Standards project. Let me pop the link in the chat for you as well. Okay, Well, just let's quickly wrap up before we head into the other session. And I can show you those resources at that point as well. But thank you so much for coming. I do appreciate how engaged everyone is, and I love the fact that Doug even said this has been a useful session. That's what I hope it was for everyone, especially on our PD day. I'm very grateful for you to have joined me today. Feel free to connect with us on all of our socials, especially Facebook. That's where all of our educators are, and you can you can connect with other educators across North America and create a community of practice and share your best practices that way. And finally, I do want to get your constructive feedback on how we can improve our trainings, our webinars, seminars, and maybe there are certain, subjects you'd like us to explore together. So I invite you to scan the QR code here and submit your response. I will also be circulating the link to the survey in my follow-up email. And participating means you could also enter to win a $25 Starbucks gift card. So why not just let us know what you thought, and you could potentially win some free coffee. All right. Well, thank you again. I had a lot of fun doing this presentation and creating the content for you today. As I mentioned earlier, I have the Q&A session available after this. So if you want, feel free to join me there. I'm going to recopy the link for that in the chat. So I know there were a couple messages that may have bumped the link up. So here we go. And I will see you all at hopefully at the Q&A. If not, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm sure we'll be chatting some more in the very near future.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.